Your surname might feel like nothing more than a name passed down at random, a word on a birth certificate, a line on a family tree. But for 9 of Scotland's most storied surnames, that name is also a genetic fingerprint, a marker written into the Y chromosome that has survived war, migration, and centuries of upheaval almost unchanged. Boyd, Maxwell, Dunbar, Seton, Gordon, Sinclair, Bruce, Campbell, Macdonald, 9 names, 9 clans, and 9 very different genetic stories hiding beneath the tartans and the mottos. Some of these families share a common ancestral thread stretching back further than any surname could ever record. Others turn out to be genetically unrelated to the very clans history books say they descend from. And a few carry DNA markers so specific, so precisely dated, that researchers can point to a single medieval ancestor and say, with real confidence, this is the man your surname traces back to. In this video, we're going to walk through each of these 9 surnames, one at a time, where the name came from, who carried it through history, and most importantly, what modern Y-DNA research has actually found underneath it. Is your family on this list? Let's find out what your surname has been hiding. Let's start with a name that's still common across Scotland today, Boyd, a lowland clan tied to Ayrshire in the southwest, with Dean Castle in Kilmarnock standing as one of the family's great historical strongholds. The name itself is believed to come from a Gaelic word meaning yellow or fair-haired, possibly describing a physical trait of an early ancestor, or possibly connected to the Isle of Bute. The early origins of the noble Boyd family are murky, and one persistent claim is that they descend from Simon, brother of Walter Fitz-Alan, the same Fitz-Alan family that arrived in Britain from Brittany after the Norman conquest, and went on to found Clan Stewart. It's a compelling theory, but the DNA tells a different story. Genetic testing, coordinated through the University of Strathclyde, confirms that the Boyds are not from the same paternal line as the Stewarts, ruling out a direct male line connection between the two families. Other researchers instead point to a Norman family called the Oval, who took their name from a commune in Normandy. What we do know for certain is that the surname first appears in the historical record around 1205, tied to a Robert Boyd who witnessed a land contract near Irvine and Ayr. A century later, Sir Robert Boyd of Kilmarnock rose to prominence through his loyalty to Robert the Bruce, fighting in the Scottish Wars of Independence and commanding troops at Bannockburn in 1314. Genetically, the Boyds fall within R1b, the dominant haplogroup across nearly all Scottish clans, but within the more specific U106 branch. The key marker is a SNP called FGC 12774, formed almost certainly around the time the surname itself was established in the late 12th century. A more recent marker, FT 102166, likely traces directly to that Bannockburn commander, Robert Boyd himself. Next is a name drawn straight from the landscape itself, Maxwell. Rooted in the Dumfriesshire region of southern Scotland, this lowland clan is inseparable from Caerlaverock Castle, the striking triangular fortress first built in the 13th century and held by the Maxwell family for generations. The name traces back to a Norse or Saxon nobleman named Maccus, who controlled lands along the River Tweed in the 12th century. A nearby pool or well was named after him, Maccus's Well, and over time that phrase wore down into Maxwell. The earliest documented figure in the family line is actually Maccus's father, known simply as Unduin, son of a Norseman. As for tartans, the version most associated with the clan today is instantly recognizable, but the DNA behind the name is where things get genuinely detailed. Like most Scottish clans, the Maxwells sit within R1b, and researchers have identified several distinct SNPs marking different branches of the family tree. The marker BY788 points to descent from Herbert Maxwell, born around 1268. A separate SNP, FGC 31342, traces to John Maxwell of Pollock, who lived between roughly 1370 and 1405, and sits downstream from the broader R1b subclade L21. Later branches carry their own markers too. A 1273 indicates likely descent from a later Herbert Maxwell, born around 1360, while Y 23578 points to a John Maxwell born around 1450. Taken together, these snips sketch out a family tree with remarkable precision, branch by branch, generation by generation, confirmed not by parish records alone, but by the DNA itself sitting quietly in living descendants today. Research into the wider Maxwell family is still ongoing, and University of Strathclyde researchers expect the picture to sharpen even further as more descendants come forward for testing in the years ahead. Now to a name with one of the longest documented male lines in all of Britain, Dunbar. The name comes from two Gaelic words, Dun meaning fort and bar meaning summit or headland, describing the location of Dunbar Castle on Scotland's east coast, seat of the Earls of Dunbar for centuries. The Dunbar family traces back to a man named Crinan the Thane, born around the 10th century. Some historians once believed he was one and the same as Crinan, abbot of Dunkeld and father of King Duncan I, the same Duncan later immortalized in Shakespeare's Macbeth. Modern scholarship now treats them as separate individuals, but the underlying fact remains extraordinary. Crinan the Thane lived in the late 10th century and has living male line descendants to this day, a claim backed by both documentary and genetic evidence stretching across nearly 1,000 years. A key later ancestor was Gospatrick, 1st Earl of Northumbria, who lived between roughly 1040 and 1080 and was likely related to Crinan in some way, even if the exact connection isn't fully clear. Gospatrick received lands in Dunbar and across Lothian under King Malcolm III, and his descendants held the earldom, later known as the Earldom of the March, until 1435. Genetically, the Dunbars fall within R1b, and one confirmed marker, FT29439, is carried by descendants of a cadet branch founded by David Dunbar of Duras, born around 1460. A related snip, ZP33, points to his father Alexander Dunbar of Westfield, while a third, BY17691, traces to Alexander Dunbar of Cumnock, who died around 1585. All three sit downstream from R1b, U106, a marker strongly associated historically with the Anglo-Saxon and Northumbrian migration into Scotland centuries earlier. Now to a name with a genuinely unusual twist in its history, Seton. There are a few competing theories about its origin. The most common traces the family to the village of Say in Normandy, with the Setons descending from Norman knights who arrived in Britain after 1066. Another theory points instead to Tranent, a coastal town near Edinburgh once owned by the family, and there are hints of a possible Flemish connection as well. What is certain is that the family had settled in Lothian by the mid-12th century, with Alexander de Seton holding land there, likely granted by King David I. A pivotal figure was Christopher Seton, who lived between 1278 and 1306, a staunch supporter of Robert the Bruce who married Bruce's own sister, Lady Christian Bruce. Christopher was present at Greyfriars Church in February 1306 when Bruce fatally stabbed his rival John Comyn, and accounts describe Christopher killing Comyn's uncle that same day as the man tried to intervene. Christopher was captured later that year and executed by the English at Dumfries. The real twist comes in the 15th century when Elizabeth Gordon, heiress of Clan Gordon, married Alexander Seton. Their male children took the Gordon surname rather than Seton, effectively merging the two families genetically while splitting them apart by name, eventually giving rise to the Earls and later Marquesses of Huntly. Genetically, the Setons sit within R1b U106, and the key marker is FGC 15048. A snip whose most recent common ancestor is estimated to have lived around 1350, right around the time the Seton-Gordon merger took shape. A related snip, BY72248, traces specifically to John Seton, who died around 1434, branching off from that same lineage. From that Seton marriage comes an entirely separate identity, Gordon. Though its male line DNA is genetically Seton, the name Gordon rose to become one of the most powerful in the north of Scotland. After Alexander Seton married Elizabeth Gordon, Heiress of the original Gordon lands, he adopted her family name and became the first Lord Gordon, with his sons carrying the Gordon surname forward rather than Seton. One of those sons, Alexander Gordon, became the first Earl of Huntly, founding a title that would later be elevated to the Marquisate of Huntly in the 16th century, making the Gordons one of the most influential, noble families in Scottish history. So in genetic terms, many Gordons are, on the paternal line, actually Setons, who simply changed their name upon inheriting Gordon lands and titles. This is a striking example of how surnames and biology can drift apart entirely, a family adopting a new identity while carrying an old bloodline underneath it, hidden from view for centuries. The DNA confirms this directly. Gordons descended from the Seton-Gordon merger carry the same marker as the Setons themselves, FGC 15048, downstream from the broader R1b U106 grouping. But the Gordon line also developed its own later, more specific markers. The SNP FT2 11058 appears in some, though not all, descendants of Alexander Seton Gordon, 1st Earl of Huntly, who died around 1470, marking a more recent branch point within the wider family tree. Not every Gordon today will carry this exact SNP, since Y-DNA testing depends on an unbroken paternal line reaching back to that specific ancestor. But where it does appear, it offers striking confirmation of a documented medieval lineage stretching back more than 5 centuries. Before I show you the next part, if you want to look at your own results and see where the Gordon or Seton bloodline fits into your family tree, I put a full 3-volume PDF bundle over at the OriginDNA website. It shows you how to read your raw data and find matches beyond what Ancestry or 23andMe tell you. Link is in the description, but stay right here, because what comes next is the part most people completely miss. Next up, a name closely tied to the far north of Scotland, Sinclair. Unlike Boyd, Maxwell, Dunbar, Seton, and Gordon, the detailed medieval snip-by-snip research for Sinclair isn't as fully mapped out yet, but the broad genetic picture is still striking. According to a widely referenced Y-DNA survey of Scottish clan chiefs, based on genetic testing shared through research forums and cross-checked against academic work from institutions including the University of Strathclyde, the Sinclairs fall into the very same R1b U106 haplogroup grouping as both Gordon and Boyd. That's a meaningful pattern. U106 is a subclade strongly associated historically with Germanic and Anglo-Saxon populations, and its recurrence across several unrelated lowland and noble Scottish families suggests a shared deeper ancestral thread running beneath very different surname histories and very different family stories. The Sinclairs themselves trace their name to St. Clair-sur-Elle in Normandy, arriving in Scotland in the wake of the Norman conquest, before rising to prominence through the Earldom of Orkney and later Caithness, and eventually becoming hereditary Grand Masters of Scottish Freemasonry. Rosslyn Castle and the famously ornate Rosslyn Chapel remain the clan's most recognizable legacy today, drawing visitors from across the world who often have no idea a shared genetic thread might connect them to the family. While the more granular medieval SNPs for Sinclair descendants are still being refined as more male line testers come forward, the consistency of this U106 classification across multiple independent research efforts lends real weight to the connection. It's a useful reminder that Y-DNA research isn't static. It's an ongoing process, with each new participant adding another data point that sharpens the picture for an entire surname, sometimes confirming centuries-old genealogical claims outright, and sometimes quietly overturning them instead. Few Scottish surnames carry more historical weight than Bruce. Robert the Bruce needs no introduction, the king who secured Scottish independence at Bannockburn in 1314, a battle that already came up twice in this video through the Boyd and Dunbar connections. But genetically speaking, where does the Bruce name actually sit? According to the same clan chief Y-DNA survey referenced earlier, the Bruces fall within R1bDF27, a subclade grouped together with Sutherland and Murray, 2 other historically significant Scottish surnames. This is a genuinely different branch from the U106 grouping that connects Boyd, Gordon, and Sinclair. DF27 is a subclade found in notably higher concentrations in Iberia and southwestern Europe, and its presence across these particular Scottish families hints at a different, and in some ways deeper, ancestral migration route into the country, quite distinct from the Anglo-Saxon-linked U-106 signal running through several of the other clans covered in this video. The Bruce family itself originated as the de Bruce family, Norman in origin, arriving in Britain after 1066, and granted lands in Yorkshire before establishing themselves in Scotland through marriage and royal favor generations later. Robert the Bruce's own claim to the throne came through his great-grandfather, and the family's rise from minor Norman nobility to the Scottish crown remains one of the most dramatic ascents in the country's entire history. While the specific medieval snips connecting individual Bruce descendants directly to Robert himself haven't been as precisely mapped as some other clans in this video, the DF27 classification alone offers a meaningful genetic anchor point, distinguishing the Bruces from many of their fellow lowland and noble contemporaries covered so far. Now we move into the Highlands proper, with one of the largest and most powerful clans in Scottish history, Campbell. Centered historically around Argyll and Loch Awe, with Inverarray Castle as its most iconic seat, Clan Campbell's influence over the centuries was matched by few others, expanding through strategic marriages, royal favor, and at times open conflict with rival Highland clans, most famously the Macdonalds. Genetically, Campbell belongs to R1b L21, according to the clan chief Y-DNA survey, and this is where the picture becomes especially interesting. L21 isn't unique to Campbell. It's shared with an entire cluster of major Highland clans, including MacLean, Drummond, Mackenzie, Cameron, McLaren, McPherson, Buchanan, and McGregor. That's a remarkably long list of prominent Highland surnames, all sitting within the same broad paternal haplogroup, spanning territories across much of the Western and Central Highlands. L21 itself is one of the most common R1b subclades across the British Isles and Ireland more broadly, associated with the deep Celtic-speaking populations that spread through Atlantic Europe long before the clan system as we know it ever existed. Its dominance across so many unrelated Highland clan names suggests that, at a very deep level, long before surnames, tartans, or clan identities were established, these families likely descended from a broadly shared ancestral population native to the region. That doesn't mean these clans are closely related to each other in any genealogically meaningful sense within the historical period. It means their male lines trace back to the same, much older, foundational population that took root in Western Scotland many centuries before Campbell, Cameron, or McGregor ever existed as distinct family names at all. Our final surname belongs to what is arguably the most famous Highland clan of all, Macdonald. Descended from Somerled, the 12th century warlord who carved out the lordship of the Isles and pushed Norse influence out of the western seaboard, the Macdonalds went on to rule a vast maritime territory stretching across the Hebrides and parts of the Western Highlands, at times rivaling the authority of the Scottish crown itself and acting almost as independent kings of the West. Genetically, and this is the most striking finding of this entire video, Macdonald doesn't sit within R1b at all, unlike every other clan we've covered so far. According to the clan chief Y-DNA survey, Macdonald falls within R1a, Z284, grouped alongside MacDougall and Home. This is a genuinely different paternal lineage from Boyd, Maxwell, Dunbar, Seton, Gordon, Sinclair, Bruce, and Campbell, all of which sit somewhere within the broader R1b family tree. R1a, Z284, is a subclade strongly associated with Scandinavian populations, particularly Norway, which fits remarkably well with the Macdonalds' documented Norse ancestry through Somerled, whose own lineage is traditionally linked to Norse Gaelic warlords who dominated the Hebrides for generations before the lordship of the Isles was ever formally established. In other words, where most of the surnames in this video trace back to Anglo-Saxon, Norman, or ancient Celtic-associated paternal lines, Macdonald stands genuinely apart, carrying a Scandinavian genetic signature that lines up almost perfectly with centuries of oral tradition and historical records surrounding Somerled's own Norse heritage. It's a rare case where the DNA and the legend appear to tell exactly the same story, generations after the fact. So there you have it. 9 surnames, 9 very different genetic stories. Boyd and Sinclair sharing a haplogroup despite no known family connection. Seton and Gordon turning out to be the same bloodline hiding behind 2 different names. Bruce carrying a marker linked to distant Iberian migration. And Macdonald standing entirely apart from the rest, a Scandinavian signature confirming centuries of oral tradition about Somerled and the Lordship of the Isles. What all of this shows is that a surname is never just a label. It's a thread, sometimes stretching back nearly 1,000 years, connecting you to real people, real battles, real decisions made by ancestors who had no idea their DNA would one day be read like a historical record. And the deeper truth is this: none of these findings make Scottish identity smaller or less meaningful. If anything, they make it richer, proof that every clan carries a genuine, traceable story beneath the tartan and the legend. If your surname was on this list today, I'd love to know in the comments. And if it wasn't, let me know which name you want covered next, because there are dozens more stories like these still waiting to be uncovered.
Thanks for watching this video. Before you go, your raw DNA data has hidden stories waiting to be unlocked. Tap the link in the description to download your ebook copy and find out what they are.